Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. This is actually a new chair for me. I usually get interviewed in this place, but happy to interview Jeremy tonight. I'll just give you a little sort of information on why this is happening. During the pandemic, I was doing a piece for CBS Sunday Morning. I've been doing pieces for them off and on for like 15 years. And I usually pitch a really simple idea, and then we do like a video essay of some sort. And during the pandemic, when everybody was cooking 15 meals a day, I said, I wanted to know where people were getting their recipes from. Like, what was the source? Where were people going to get their recipes? So I called my daughter, Sophie, who at the time was, I guess, 25. And I said, your dad has a lot of cookbooks. Obviously, you're getting all your recipes from my cookbooks, right? She's like, never open them. I said, okay, give me the good news. Where do you get your recipes from? She said, I get them from TikTok. And I said, is there anybody in particular that you like to use? And she said, I checked this kid out named Jeremy Scheck. And so I talked about him I looked him up, obviously. I did a bunch of research, and I talked about him on my CBS Sunday Morning piece as sort of the new reality. Somebody who's written 17 cookbooks. I want people to use cookbooks, of course. But the bottom line is we're getting recipes from all over the place, including places like Jeremy's site, who, by the way, has 2.1 million followers on TikTok. I looked it up today. It's pretty crazy. Which is just mind-blowing to me, but it's just so amazing. The other reason why I'm interested in somebody like Jeremy, and obviously we have a huge age difference here, is that when things that happen to you when you're younger, I think really obviously stay with you. Even the good things. And I remember in 1994, I opened my second restaurant in New York. It was called Bolo. It was right after Mesa Grill. Mesa Grill had been open about 3 years. It was in 1994, so I think I was probably around 29 years old or something like that. And I had been getting a lot of good media, a lot of press for Mesa Grill, for Bolo, and I always tell people, like, I was getting the David Chang press back then. It's like I was in a lot of the ink for the restaurant business, and I had two older French chefs come in, and I was incredibly nervous, as you can imagine, because these guys they were just household names. Let's put it that way. One of them was the first chef at Le Cirque, and the other one was a chef that was just, somebody that everybody knows who this person is. And that particular person actually I had asked them to write a quote for my very first cookbook, and I had asked a bunch of people to do it. And one of the chefs actually said no. And because he said no, it's one of the things that I always remember. And when somebody sends me a book to give them a quote, even if I don't know them, I know that if I take 15 or 20 minutes or a half an hour to read their manuscript or to do a little research, I can find something really good to say about them, because I know how hard it is for somebody to write a cookbook. The other chef was completely the opposite. He said to me, I want to tell you something. I don't understand this food. I don't know half of the ingredients, but it's fabulous, and it's so great that you're showing people like me how to cook different kinds of things. And so you remember those kinds of things. So when Jeremy kind of came into my orbit, I was like, I'm going to learn something from Jeremy Scheck. And that's what's so wonderful about food, is that it just keeps going on and on. And one of the great things is that you can never know it all. And that's the thing that excites me. And so when somebody like Jeremy comes along and people of his ilk are making all this noise on TikTok and Instagram and wherever you can find it, I think it's a great thing. So I'm happy to talk about your book. So Jeremy, give us a little bit of your background. So I know you worked at a bakery first. Okay.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I had my free time, and I kind of was like, I need to do something productive with this. And I have always been the sort of kid that's planning the next meal while I'm eating the current one. And so I thought, like, what if I just try to take something related to food seriously for a little bit and see what happens? So I went to my local bakery and asked for a job, and I also decided to start blogging on just like my own little website, everything that I was making. And so pretty much every day after school in high school, I would make something, and then I would like take pictures and write up the recipe, and then I would bring it in the next day for my friends to try. And it got to the point where it was a little Pavlovian, like my friends would start to get hungry on a day that I didn't bring something in. And the blog was more a way for me to just track what I was doing, thinking a little bit strategically. I was thinking, well, like, it's great to have an interest and have a hobby, but looking ahead to colleges or whatever it may be, it might be smart to have like a documented almost paper trail of, it's not just, oh, and I like to cook. It's like, well, this is what I've been doing for the past 4 years. So no one was really looking at it other than like my grandma, but it was just a fun thing for me. And also, like, at minimum, I had my family recipes or whatever I liked the most in one place that I could refer to. So that's sort of the start. And then I went to, originally, I applied for food science at Cornell because I really liked chemistry and biology in high school. I did not like them at Cornell. I suffered through the first semester, which was definitely worthwhile because I still really enjoy science. It was more like the overall, the food science program was lumped in with all the pre-med classes except for the one food science class or 2 food science classes per semester. And so I was like, okay, how can I take the food classes that I'm interested in without having to take organic chemistry, which really is not that useful, even if you are interested in like some of the science that's going on in the kitchen. And, well, you know, it might be useful to some people, but to most home cooks also, which is like has always been my focus more so than like some super precise like executing 300 perfect dishes. I think it's great to have like an understanding of chemistry and biology, but it doesn't need to be like leaps and bounds beyond that.
Maybe in baking.
Yeah, maybe.
More so.
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing we definitely don't have in common is our educational career. I dropped out of high school when I was in 10th grade. You went to Cornell. Very, very different. So when I dropped out of high school, like, it was very simple. I needed a job. And I didn't know that I wanted to be a chef, but I started working in a restaurant. And then I finally, when I started working with my hands, I realized that I needed to work with my hands. I needed vocational education. And then I fell in love with it, and on and on and on from there. But, and then when I look back on it, you know, I remember, and I didn't know this at the time, because really being a chef or being in the food industry was not a profession that people in my generation thought of as a profession to look forward to. It wasn't, you know, doctor, lawyer, chef. I mean, it just wasn't there. You know, now it's obviously a lot more accepted, and people want to do it for all the good reasons. But when I look back on my childhood, I think about watching Julia Child and the Galloping Gourmet. Do you know who the Galloping Gourmet is?
No, I know Julia Child.
I knew this was not going to work out. So the Galloping Gourmet was, anyway. So his name was Graham Kerr, and he was a chef, and he would make these gourmet meals. They were very sort of, I guess, sort of French inspired more than anything else. Very, very classic, cooked with a lot of wine. He was like this home cook, but like, and then he'd always like pick the prettiest girl out of the audience and bring her down, and they'd sit and finish and have a meal. That would be the end of the show. But, you know, it was like really good cooking. And then Julia Child was Julia Child, of course. But I asked for an easy bake oven. Like, what was your childhood like? Were you like watching cooking shows?
Yeah, I definitely really enjoyed watching Food Network mostly. I also really liked going retroactively to watch old Julia Child things. Like in high school, I made any project that I could possibly have about food. So if it was a math project, I was doing statistics on the best way to measure flour. If it was biology, I was
not doing that.
Like
I was definitely not doing that.
The density of different ways to make a cake. And for the big project that I had to do in high school, I compared Ina Garten and Julia Child's books, as an English paper.
Really?
And
what was the result?
well, they had a lot of similarities. I mean, obviously, the generational differences made, Ina Garten, her recipes are a lot faster and a little bit more straightforward. And Julia Child's are the Boeuf Bourguignon has 2 individual extra recipes for
Right.
But Ina Garten uses filet mignon in her Boeuf Bourguignon, and that's why it's faster. So there is a little bit of the trade-off of it's definitely the accessibility varies whether you have time or money to do.
No, for
recipes.
sure. Everybody loves Ina. She's the queen. I just did a show with her. Anyway, well, sorry. All right. So, okay, but it's sort of it's kind of actually amazing to me that you had this blog in high school. You worked in a bakery. You taught some classes at Williams-Sonoma as well.
Oh yeah, that was another thing.
Yeah.
So I showed up at my local Williams-Sonoma when I was 16. I don't know why they let me do this, but I asked if I could do some demonstrations. I knew they had classes, and so I did 3 or 4 baking demonstrations in high school, and then they were when you're 18, come and get a job. And so I did, and then got paid to teach the cooking classes. Which
Right.
is,
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but then all of a sudden, you have a cookbook, and you have dishes like sheet pan teriyaki salmon, et cetera. How do you? Somebody said, sounds good, right? That's one of the things about Jeremy's book is that, and this is really important. The yummy factor is big time in this book, right? And now you can sometimes cookbooks they're fancy or they're pretty or whatever it is, but to me, the most important thing about any recipe is that it tastes good or that it makes you want to eat it. It gets your taste buds going. And I find throughout this book, every time I turn the page is something that I want to eat, which is really key.
that's all I want to hear.
Exactly.
So, thank you.
And we were talking before, there's a lot of family in this book, right? Talk about that.
Yeah. So the book is it really it's trite, but it takes a village, and there's just so many different aspects of the family involvement in the book. I'm one of 4 boys. A lot of the influence in my cooking is the practicality of my mom cooking for us pretty much all of our meals growing up, and also the oldest and youngest are 10 years apart. We still have a brother at home, so it's a lot of cooking, and the practicality really leans into okay, someone has soccer practice an hour later. What's a recipe that's gonna stay good if we have to eat it at different times? Or so that, there's bone-in chicken thigh recipes because that's not gonna dry out. Or the the crispy roast potatoes maybe even get better if you just leave them in the oven turned off for an hour. And so there's the aspect of practicality, which kind of took me into the college cooking. And so when I was in college and I sort of changed the focus of my blog to be about easy recipes, which also I started doing after I had the idea for the book. So I thought of the book idea of okay, what are the essential recipes that you're moving out on your own, you need to feed yourself 3 times a day, and it's
Right.
Oh my God. So you have to make a few breakfasts, and then what are the proteins, and you should always have chocolate chip cookie dough in your freezer for emergencies and things like that.
These are the hardships of life, right?
Exactly. The feedback I got on the blog, though, once I started doing the college-specific stuff, kind of came back to the mom stuff, because I was getting like my mom's friends saying like, I know this is for students, but I'm a busy mom and these recipes are like honestly what I have the bandwidth for. So there's that aspect. I have both grandmas involved. So one of my grandmas illustrated the book with watercolor paintings, and my other grandma has like several recipes and really is the original like recipe developer in our family. I have several aunts that like influenced the book and recipe tested. I wanted recipe testers of all different like experience levels.
So basically you put your whole family to work for this book.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, I mean, and I think that this is one of the things that's really nice about this, is because when you see somebody on TikTok that's so incredibly popular, sometimes you miss the human element of this whole thing. And family and food obviously goes hand in hand. It's incredibly important. So it leads me to my next question, which is like, you specifically say in this book that you didn't create these recipes per se, and you sort of recreate things that you see. Like, where do you get your inspiration from?
Well, like day to day when I'm making a video or even writing like of the recipes for a book idea.
Because you need constant content to stay,
I'm not someone who is like thinking a month ahead, like I'm gonna do this, so the first of the week, and then later in the month, this is the video I'm making. I make my videos based on what am I having for dinner, what am I cooking that day, and usually like have the turnaround time of like the day of is like when I'm posting the video. So I kind of get my inspiration based off of like seasonality, what's on sale. I like to physically be at a grocery store most of the time, although like the convenience of ordering stuff is great when you're in a pinch, but like I want to pick out like what looks good. Sometimes you just see something and that's what inspires you. And that also plays into like the structure of the book, being it's focused on the staples, and there's recipes that only use the pantry staples, and then there's some recipes, like most of them have like, the star protein or vegetable added into it, and that's basically how I shop and think about recipes. I am looking mainly for, okay, that chicken looks good today, this vegetable's on sale, and then I know that I already have my core ingredients that I can do whatever treatment I want to the couple other things. So that's usually how I approach the inspiration. But also, like, I'm just not trying to invent. Like, I think everything has been done before. It's really hard to come up with something truly new. So my focus is like, okay, I love key lime pie. What's my favorite key lime pie as a recipe?
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay. And then, like, I love the sections in this book because, you talk about food safety, which is, you don't see a lot in cookbooks. Why is that so important to you?
Yeah, well, even though I was quick to get out of the food science major, I really stuck with, I took almost more food classes than the ones for my Spanish and Italian majors. As electives, I took like nutrition classes and horticulture classes and dairy science, and it was like so cool. I think I was the only person having fun at Cornell, like, because I just took fun classes.
You're not, is anybody here from Cornell? I just want to make sure. You work there? No. Okay.
High ratio in here. And so I lost my train of thought.
Food safety.
Oh yeah, I wanted the science to be like a core part, and I thought the food safety was like one of the more important parts of it. And there was, even within that, like things that I find kind of interesting that you might be cooking for 40 years and not know that, like, everyone says, okay, you need to cook chicken to 165, but because of like pasteurization and like, if you use a sous vide, you might realize this, but like if you can hold the temperature for like 10 seconds, you can go like 5 degrees lower. If you can hold the temperature for like 3 minutes, you can cook it to like 150, and you might like it more like that. And so I actually think that's something like, yes, you need to be safe and you want to not poison people with salmonella, and that's why this chapter is like, don't poison yourself, food safety 101. But I do think that there's like things that you might not know whether, like, if you're starting out, like, it's really helpful to know. But even if you've been cooking a long time, and it's not just about food safety, there's like food science woven throughout, like how does cast iron work, or what's the deal with bottled citrus and things like that, that maybe you're observing, oh, why does it taste like this, but you don't actually have the background to understand why.
Yeah, and then there's, you talk about like tools and equipment, and also like there's a section called quick tips, which the thing that I find, especially like on Instagram or TikTok, is like when I give out a quick tip about cooking, it gets so many more views than if you try to do something more elaborate. Like the other day Thanksgiving morning, I don't know, I was feeling inspired to talk about something Thanksgiving, and I was like, okay, here's my tip of the day. Like, just put a bunch of chicken broth with a ladle on the back, hot chicken broth with a ladle, and you can reheat the turkey that you've
my grandma did that.
Sliced, and but like those kinds of little small tips like that, like that's what people want. They want that takeaway, And you talk about things like, when to use salt, which is like, it's kind of funny when you hear it, but like, one of the things that I say in my kitchens more than anything else is I ask my cooks and my chefs, did you season that with salt and pepper? I literally say that more than anything else in my kitchen because it's the basics and the foundation of cooking. And so you talk about like when to use salt and when not to use salt. I love this one about like blooming spices, and that you have to cook tomato paste. You have to cook the rawness of the tomato paste out. A lot of people don't know that, but like, why is that something that's important? You find like those are the things that people are missing?
Yeah, so when I was teaching the cooking classes at Williams-Sonoma, they would
when you were 16?
No. Once I was
18.
Yeah, 18. Okay. They would hand me a recipe, and it was the same class nationally. So it would be like, you're teaching fried chicken tomorrow, or you're teaching this pasta recipe tomorrow. And sometimes it was something that I had never made before. So I would have to go home, I would watch like 5 different videos on how to make the recipe, and I would make it. And what it really helped me do was like identify what are the kind of standard order of operations, what are the common pitfalls. It helped me look at a recipe and say, okay, this is just braising, or okay, this is just frying, and it's mostly going to be the same thing. And I actually think, even though like obviously I was a little bit in over my head, like all of the classes went well. People seemed to genuinely get a lot out of them, and I think that like that played into how I write my recipes, where yes, if you follow the recipe word for word, you're gonna really like it and it's gonna come out great. But I also write it in a way where it's obvious like what you can change about it, and that the technique is emphasized. So I have 2 concrete braising recipes, like a short rib and a brisket recipe. But I also have a section generally on braising, and I explain in that section and in those recipes, like, well, you don't have to do it with these specific cuts. It's basically the same thing if you're doing it with a pork butt or a beef shank or lamb. Like, there's so many different things that you can change, and if you don't want to use Coca-Cola for your brisket, try pomegranate juice or red wine, and it's supposed to kind of imbue the technique and not just be like following one recipe and then it comes out and you don't really know how you got there without the recipe the next time.
Like, what do you like to eat? Because like when you look at the book, it's not one specific cuisine. There's like the direction. It doesn't have like one particular direction. But like, what do you like to eat?
It's an interesting question, because I would say like what I cook and what my favorite foods are not necessarily the same thing. Like, if I could only choose 2 cuisines, I would choose Thai and Persian, which also are like kind of opposite, like in the flavor profiles. Those are like my favorites, but they're both things that are super sophisticated cuisines and not something I'm an expert on it by any stretch of the imagination, and I don't really cook them myself, so it's like a pleasure to go out to eat for those things. I studied Spanish and Italian. Those are the things that I like can read firsthand. Classic American recipes, Latin American recipes, Spanish and Italian, are like the ones that I'm like interested in doing research on and like actually like going back and learning about it, and like the recipes from like my family's Ashkenazi heritage. Like I love to make like my grandma's and my great grandma's recipes, but I love them. But like it is like kind of a difference between what I enjoy cooking and what I would choose to eat like last meal.
Right. What'd you have tonight?
JG Melon.
Yeah. Best cheeseburger in the world, baby. I've had so many J.G. Mellon cheeseburgers in my life. It's crazy. All right, you have a whole thing about air fryers. All right, I'm gonna confess. I've never used one. Do you guys like them?
Okay.
How do you feel about an air fryer? Because you kind of break it down.
Yeah. So I started off very much as an air fryer skeptic.
Isn't it like a toaster oven?
Exactly. That's the thing that annoyed me about it, because I'm like, this is just a convection oven with marketing. It's not frying. And so I think like the best things to make in an air fryer are not like fried chicken. It's like anything that you would use a regular convection oven for. It is helpful in that, especially if you're cooking for like a small number. Like I have a little one, and it maybe fits 4 cups of food in it.
4 cups of food?
Yeah, like the chamber area is like, it's quite small.
Okay.
It heats up in 1 minute. And it does circulate the air better than like a larger oven. So I have a note in the book, just like first of all, like all the recipes that can be made with a convection oven, there's like a little tag at the top, like use convection if you have it, and I give you both temperatures, because usually you can use a slightly lower temperature with convection. And you can also use an air fryer anytime that I say to use convection. I think that like when you're cooking for yourself, I'm all about lowering the barriers to entry to like, okay, what's gonna prevent me from cooking? And if it's heating up the oven for 20 minutes, like I'm all for using the air fryer.
Do you use a microwave?
Yeah.
For what?
Softening butter, reheating leftovers, melting chocolate.
That's it.
If I'm making challah dough, I use my grandma's trick. I put the cup and a quarter of water, room temperature, in the microwave for 50 seconds, and it's the perfect temperature for the yeast.
That was worth the price of admission right there. It's like, I have to say, it's so impressive, isn't it? It's like, it's amazing how much knowledge you have. It's so great. You were talking about Persian food and Thai food, right? What are the things about them that really entices you? And you did say, like, that you don't consider yourself a real expert in that cuisine. So you go out to eat it more than anything else.
For Thai food, I love, well, in general, like I am really into, like, I talk a lot about the 5 senses and the difference between taste and flavor, and any cuisine that really focuses on like all of the senses and also texture and also spice in the case of Thai cuisine. Like I'm really intrigued by that. I love how like rich like Thai style curries can be with like coconut milk instead of butter, which I love. It's
you
just,
love the butter, or you love
I
the
love butter, but
okay.
I love that it can be like almost like equally as velvety without it in
Right.
different ways. I love the aromatics. And then for Persian cuisine, I love like
crispy rice.
the tahdig is like to die for. Rice is my favorite food, rice with sauce. So that also works with both cuisines. No, it
That's
depends
your next
on the
book,
sauce.
Rice with Sauce.
Yep, good idea. Yeah. And I love the stews. I love how Persian food uses so many herbs and uses them in ways that we don't necessarily, like, not a lot of cooking of tender herbs in like more Western cuisines, but like kuku sabzi is like the omelet held together. It's basically just chopped up herbs loosely held together by egg, or like gourmet sabzi, like the herb stew. I love like pomegranate molasses, which I do use in a few
Great
of the
ingredient,
recipes.
yeah.
And I love the acidity that they really focus on in both cuisines.
Do you like Korean food as well?
Yeah, a lot.
Good flavors.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you watch the Food Network at all?
I did more so, like I don't have cable right now, so.
You can stream it.
Yeah. I don't watch a lot of TV, to be honest, because I'm so glued to TikTok, and that might be like the I follow the Food Network accounts on social media, and there's a lot of clips. But I was more watched it when I was living at home.
No, I didn't ask you that question because I want you to answer in the affirmative. I'm really curious.
Yeah.
Because I'm curious about like who your audience is.
Yeah.
Like and then also like people in your demographic. Where are they going to get their food knowledge?
I feel like in the vein of like the Food Network, it's like from a young age, there's specific chefs that I started to follow, whether it's you, Alex Gornishelli, Ina Garten, and they're people that I follow more like as individuals,
Yeah.
and I watch their stuff and I'm interested in what they're doing. I love anything that Padma Lakshmi does. I'm obsessed with Taste the Nation. It's like, it's just...
That's her travel show.
Yeah,
Right.
It's within the U.S., going to different immigrant communities and like looking at their food. I loved Top Chef when I was younger, and so yeah, I think it's more like identifying like the individuals that I like to look at. Anything Melissa Clark, a lot of New York Times cooking.
Melissa Clark was an intern in my restaurant at Mesa Grill.
Wow.
Like 1991.
Wow.
It's unbelievable. Her recipes are spectacular.
40 cookbooks later.
No. I mean, and like she's like, I really feel like Melissa Clark is like, her body of work it's a library.
If I could do half or a quarter of that for my generation, I'll be completely content. That.
Yes, if you can do that, you'll be fine, for sure. So what do you want to do with this? Okay, so here you are, you're sitting like in front of this amazing crowd of people at the 92nd Street Y, which like not everybody gets invited here. Just so you know.
Well, thank you, because
no.
it wouldn't have happened without you.
First of all, I don't believe that, and you're making a lot of noise in the best way, and like I'm sure people ask you these kinds of questions all the time, like, do you want to be in the restaurant business? Do you want to open a restaurant? Do you want to write more cookbooks? Do you want your own TV show? Maybe you don't care about TV because it's sort of you have your own media presence in other places. Like what do you like? I don't want to say what's next, but like what's going through your mind?
Yeah, so I would say 2 out of 3. I have never been like, I liked working at the bakery. It was really good for like learning sort of the hygiene of working in a professional kitchen, but I feel like I'm spoiled to be able to write the cookbook, and like it's just my dream job. And so the idea of working like 12 hours a day or plus like in a restaurant. Also, I'm just focused on writing recipes for home cooks, and so I think like it's kind of a different skill set to execute like the perfect identical dishes versus like one really great meal for the family. And I did social media because I wanted to write a cookbook, and I was like, what's the way that would make this realistic? And I would love to write more books. I would love to do some sort of travel show, or, I mean, that would be like a total dream, like something kind of in the vein of, I love Samin Nosrat and like Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat,
That's
like with the science component and the culinary component and the travel. Obviously, it's something in the vein of like Anthony Bourdain. I don't know that I'm as like wild as he was, but
You're not. You're definitely not.
But I do really like to travel.
Yeah.
So somewhere in the middle between the opposites, Samin and Anthony.
Yeah. Okay, so when Sophie, my daughter, first told me about you, you had just put up, or like recently had put up this recipe, and it's in your book. And it's interesting because this is like one of the most like talked about recipes in the last few years in New York City, which is a spicy rigatoni alla vodka, right? And getting a reservation at Carbone is not easy, and this is the dish that he's become known for. It's also $34, but you can make it for a lot less, I'm sure. But I listened to Jeremy talk about this recipe when Sophie turned me on to his site, and a couple of things occurred to me right away, which was that he really knows what he's talking about. I can tell immediately. There are some people, on social media that can get away with kind of getting through it, and like sometimes you can tell, like, well, they seem very practiced. But Jeremy seemed incredibly comfortable in his description, the way he talked about it, the way he moved around the kitchen, so to speak, with his hands and et cetera. And then the dish looked great. But the thing that really upset me was that his Italian was spectacular. And I spent a lot of time in Italy, and I take a lot of Italian classes. I can barely say hello. But when you listen to Jeremy talk about this dish, you can tell like you've done obviously like a lot of traveling, and a lot of it obviously is revolved around food. So can you take us through this dish?
Yeah, so I always thought it was funny that this was the dish that took the internet by storm, because like we all grew up with penne alla vodka,
right?
And it's kind of just like a fancier version. So the thing I love about this recipe though is that, first of all, if you're asking me like, what do you want to eat? That's one of the things. And
it's a pretty enjoyable dish.
It hits all the notes.
Yeah.
And I love that it kind of has all the order of operations that a lot of recipes need. So it's a really good recipe to kind of like teach through, because all good recipes start by like you're sautéing your onions and your garlic, and then frying off the spices. And a lot of people, like I see so many recipes where people put like dry spices into a liquid, and it's like you're really missing out if you're not like frying them off. And the same thing with the tomato paste. Like it has so much more flavor. Sometimes it can have like a tinny flavor if you don't cook it off. So that kind of order, and before you add any liquid, is something that I like to emphasize. And then also cooking in pasta in general. I think that the average American does it very differently than the average Italian. And this is definitely kind of, they have like penne alla vodka in Italy, and it was definitely like a thing in the 80s, but it's really kind of thought of more as like an American thing. And I love Italian American food, like Carbone. It's the best Italian American
Everybody
restaurant.
wants chicken parm.
Yeah,
I don't
so
care
good.
what they say.
Yeah, they don't know about that in Italy, but like,
right.
Anyway, so the things that I like to emphasize, like in one of my earliest videos was talking about like how to make pasta the way that most people do in Italy and what the difference is. And one thing is you look at like the package and it says cook 9 to 11 minutes. And so immediately I'm like, okay, you need to cook it 9 minutes. But that's not the boil time, that's all the time on the heat. And a lot of people, like, whenever you see an Italian eating pasta in the US, they're always like scotta, like overcooked. And it's also interesting because like you digest it differently if it's cooked al dente. Like it's, so I try to write it where, okay, you boil it and then you take it out like 3 minutes early and cook it the remaining time in the sauce. And that's how you can finish it al dente. Al dente is not like for when you're boiling it. And then
because it's carryover cooking.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that like, I feel like when you imagine a plate of spaghetti and meatballs, you imagine the dry pile of spaghetti and then a spoon of sauce over it. And I never liked that growing up. And I was like, I really wasn't the biggest pasta person growing up, and I think it was because that's how it was usually served to me. And I realized that usually in Italy they talk about Montecatura, which is like the mixing and the marrying of the sauce with the pasta. And so I have a lot of kind of general information on pasta cooking and stuff, but that was like, you have to use the pasta water, and usually you add butter or olive oil, and it's the way that, this is one that does have cream, but a lot of pasta recipes in Italy don't use cream, but they still talk about la cremina, which is like the diminutive of cream, and it's like just meaning that it's like a creamy sauce without adding in actual cream. And whether it's like aglio e olio or like the pasta al burro e parmigiano, like the fettuccine alfredo, like original one that without cream, like it's always talking about like how do you emulsify the cheese with the fat and the pasta water.
Yeah.
And
so yours has tomato paste. Do you see some recipes that have like tomato sauce?
yeah, so I like it with tomato paste. The one thing that I've changed over the course, so like I first posted this in May of 2020, and then I was like fully at my parents' house in lockdown. Later on, a Cornell friend became a manager at at Carbone, so I had the opportunity to try it a few times, and as much as I hated to admit it, I was like, this is so much better than mine. And so I was trying to figure out like what am I missing, and I feel like it's Calabrian, like fermented Calabrian chili paste.
Yeah.
And so that is also one of the staple ingredients. And you can get it at Trader Joe's. Like most of the staple ingredients are really, really basic.
Oh, but that made it into the recipe?
Yeah, it made it into the recipe because I think it makes it that much better.
Of your experience.
And it's also in like 5 other recipes because you can put it in your balsamic vinaigrette and do like a sweet and spicy or in a braise, so.
I use so much of it. It's so good. All right, we're going to take some questions from the audience. Okay. First question is, how long does a cookbook take to create, start to finish?
So I think the typical process with a kind of traditional publisher is usually 2 years, like a year to write it, and then almost a full year to edit and publish. I had the idea.
Were you on time?
Yeah.
All right, good for you.
Yeah.
It's a rare moment. All right. Jeremy, what would you challenge Bobby to if you were a contestant on Beat Bobby Flay?
Ooh.
Shocking that this one came out.
That's a really good question. Maybe some sort of like.
Like, what's your signature dish? Would you say that you have one?
I would say maybe like a braised short rib or brisket or a roast chicken.
45 minutes.
More
no
like,
air fryers.
Oh, we only have 45 minutes. Oh, I guess I would have to use a pressure cooker or something.
Pressure cooker, yeah.
Oh, maybe I would do, I don't know, that's hard.
All right, well, don't tell me. I'm going to have you on. All right. What's your favorite thing to eat in New York City?
I've been really liking Sofre, which is a Persian restaurant in Brooklyn, and also the Four Horsemen in Williamsburg. Really, really good.
Okay. How can I cook or bake if I don't want to have major cleanup? Order in.
Yeah.
And what's your favorite dessert recipe?
Probably the ginger snap key lime pie in the book. That's what I make from ginger snap key lime pie. That's what I make from my own birthday.
Is it ginger snap like crust?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Because I'm not the biggest graham cracker person. I was like, what could I do in the same thing that would taste better?
Yeah, ginger and lime is great. That sounds great. All right, I'll be making that. All right, Jeremy, I know you've always loved cooking, but when did it shift to knowing that it would be a full-time career? If not cooking, then what?
So when I was a sophomore in college is when the pandemic started. And so before that, I was just doing my blog as a casual thing. And I was a Spanish and Italian major, interested in food. I lined up an internship at Italy to do like the marketing. And I also had a social media job on campus. And so I was thinking about that, but more like behind the scenes. And I was like, I've always been interested in photography. I photographed the book. Like I was interested in food, but I didn't think that it was going to be this. And so if you had asked me before that, like, what's your dream job, I would say, well, when I was really young, ice cream truck driver and a baker, and then cookbook author. But I never thought it was something that I could, like, do for real. I thought it would always have to be, like, a little bit of a side project when I had a real job.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you shot all the photos for the book.
Yeah, I mean, the food stylist and the prop stylist made it a lot easier because what a lot of people don't know about food styling is, like, they cook all of it for the photo shoot. And it's so cool, and to me it seems like one of the hardest jobs because you have to look at a recipe you've never made before and then make it better than anyone could ever make it. And it still has to look like homemade, but then also like you could never do it that well.
But how do you feel about somebody else cooking your food?
Well, I loved it because I got to just focus on I mean, I was cooking it a million times to test the recipes, and also because they're so good at their job, they're sort of like the final boss of recipe testing because they're using the book to make the recipes, and luckily there weren't that many notes, but they are the last people who are like, hey, like, it says to cook the onions this amount of time, but they're definitely not ready, or something like that. So I liked it. It was a pleasure.
You know, I think this is my question. So I think, like, the audience would like to hear a little bit about, you don't have to give a lot of information about this, but, like, how do you, like, what your business is like as somebody who has this many followers on TikTok? It's like, you know, we'll see people who do, like, sponsored posts and things like that. Like, how does it work?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, like, when my mom is, like, telling, like, you know, a friend asks, oh, what are your kids up to? They don't really understand that it's, like, a full-time job. And
you don't really love the term influencer?
That's not my favorite.
Okay.
I mean, it is what it is, and it's like I don't feel.
What should we call you?
I like to say cookbook author. But
you're in the Library of Congress, my man, so you can definitely do that. That's for sure.
You know, but it's not something that I'm trying to, like, fight because I think it will be an uphill battle. But basically, like, the past 2 years, I've felt like it's sort of 50-50 between videos and book stuff. And so the videos can be, like, monetized in two ways: from the views themselves, which is definitely kind of fickle depending on, like, you know, you might have one great video that will, like, pay rent, and then you might go months without that. And then also sponsorships, which also, like, it is, you know, it's not, it's, you never know when they're gonna come up, but, like, it is really cool when, like, I'm, like, talking about Kerrygold butter, and then they're like, we want you to use it, and we'll pay you to use it in a video. I'm like, well, I'm already using it. So, like, or Whole Food, like, it's really fun when it's something like that, and I'm lucky that, like, I get to be really discerning and only work with company, like, you know, it's illegal to say that to endorse a product that you don't actually endorse, and it's definitely more like no's than yeses when I'm seeing these things, but it's really cool that I get to work with, like, brands that I'm already loving or be exposed to, like, something new that's really interesting. And so that's kind of like the day-to-day, and I have a great team that they kind of handle the dealing with the companies, and so I just focus on the videos themselves, and then the book also, like, with the advance, like, that was helpful because I could plan a couple years. Like, the book advance is agreed upon at signing, but it's paid out over, like, 2.5 years. So I, like, kind of at least can know, like, at minimum, this is what I'm working with and plan that way. But, you know, I can't complain at all. It's definitely weird at sometimes, like, it's being sort of freelance. There's not, like, a regular paycheck, and so yeah, it is what it is, and it's definitely fun, and I wouldn't trade it.
Great, that's the most important thing. Okay, so here's a question. How have your travels influenced your recipe development, and how do you balance those inspirations and flavors with ensuring the recipes are still accessible?
That's interesting. And like I am strongly, I'm most likely gonna move to Spain for a year in a couple months. That's something I've really wanted to do. I was an au pair there before college, and I hope to be working on another book at the time, but that also means that I'm gonna be working with slightly different ingredients. They're just, even a stick of butter is gonna be, 2 sticks of butter, they're usually like 250 grams instead of 226 grams, or it's just slightly different. And I think it will be a good challenge because at the end of the day, I'm trying to write recipes that will work in anyone's kitchen. And I write my baking recipes in metric and imperial measurements. And I try to make it as accessible to an international audience as possible. And so I definitely will have to think about what ingredients I have there and how that can be translated. And I will also definitely have to test them with the ingredients that are more commonly available in the US.
Do you like to bake or do you like savory food better?
I like eating, I have a strong sweet tooth, but I think at the end of the day, I would choose savory over sweet. I do like baking because that was kind of the first thing that I focused on. And I feel like there's a lot of people who cook but they don't bake, and so what to me feels like the same amount of effort sometimes comes across as a lot more special baking.
All right, well, I'll give you one last piece of advice, which is if you come on Beat Bobby Flay, bake something.
Oh, smart, okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jeremy Scheck. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.